Roman was 38 years old, a black man whose life was measured in steel and grease and the patient hum of massive machinery. For 14 years, he had worked as a port crane mechanic in Jacksonville, Florida, earning a steady, respectable $63,000 a year. His hands, calloused and capable, could diagnose the intricate complaints of a multi-ton gantry crane from a single shutter or an off-key hydraulic whine. He lived a life of tangible things, torque wrenches, gearboxes, and the solid, comforting weight of a paycheck that always cleared. His world was the sprawling, metallic forest of the port, a place of immense power and quiet dignity. He was a good man, a simple man, or so he believed, and his entire world was about to be rendered unrecognizable by a single sheet of paper. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked inside a crisp, heavy envelope from a law firm he'd never heard of, Albright, Sterling, and Finch. It felt alien in his hands, too formal for their modest mailbox in the Avondale neighborhood. He sat at their small $400 IKEA kitchen table, the one Yara always said she wanted to replace with something from Restoration Hardware for $3,000. He slit the envelope open with a butter knife. The words inside were dense, legal, but a few phrases leaped out. Last will and testament of your great-aunt, Elara Vance, and sole beneficiary of the estate, and then the number. A number so large, it seemed like a typo, a string of zeros that his mind struggled to process. $50 million. For a moment, Roman couldn't breathe. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, trapped thing. He thought of his great-aunt Elara, a woman he'd only met a handful of times as a child. She was his grandmother's quiet, eccentric sister, who had moved away to California decades ago and invested wisely in something called silicon. He remembered her sending him a $50 savings bond for his 10th birthday. He never imagined this. The letter stated the funds were being transferred into a newly established trust account in his name, and the process would be finalized by Friday. $50 million. He looked around the kitchen of their $450,000 house, a home that always felt like they were stretching to afford. He saw the faint water stain on the ceiling they hadn't gotten around to fixing. He saw his own $89 Timex watch on the counter next to Yara's car keys, the ones attached to the fob for her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car she'd insisted was a necessity. His first, overwhelming thought was not of himself, but of her. Yara, his wife of 10 years. He could finally give her everything she ever wanted. No more budgets, no more her sighing over travel magazines, looking at $15,000 trips to the Amalfi Coast. No more of the subtle, persistent tension that came from her expensive tastes brushing up against his mechanic's salary. He imagined her face when he told her. The shock, the joy, the way her eyes would light up. Their life, their entire future, had been rewritten in the span of 5 minutes. He had to tell her. Not over the phone, in person. He would drive to her right now and surprise her. He glanced at the clock. It was 11:30 a.m. She had mentioned she was having lunch with her girlfriends today. He knew she liked that fancy place by the river, LaRue. He'd surprise her there, walk in holding this letter, and watch her world change. He had no idea how right he was. Her world was about to change. And so was his. What would you do if your life changed in an instant? Let us know in the comments below. Roman thought he knew exactly what to do, but he had no idea what was waiting for him just a few miles away. Their life together was a carefully curated facade, though only one of them knew it. Roman saw it as a marriage of opposites that somehow worked. He was the steady foundation. She was the beautiful, sparkling thing built upon it. Their home in Avondale was her masterpiece. She had chosen every piece of furniture, from the $2,500 velvet sofa in the living room to the abstract art prints from West Elm that cost $300 each and, to Roman's eye, looked like paint spills. He'd come home from a 10-hour shift at the port, his deep brown skin luminous under a thin sheen of sweat, his work boots leaving faint greasy prints on the welcome mat he was careful to wipe his feet on. He'd find her sipping a glass of $80 Sancerre, scrolling through her phone. "Don't track that grime in here, honey," she'd say without looking up from the screen. It wasn't unkind, not really. It was just Yara. He loved her. Or at least, he loved the idea of her he held in his heart. He loved her ambition, her desire for finer things, even if it made him feel inadequate at times. He showed his love through acts of service, the only way he truly knew how. He was the one who maintained her BMW, changing the oil himself to save the $120 fee at the dealership. He was the one who packed her lunch on the days she worked her part-time job managing a high-end boutique, carefully arranging a salad in a container, just the way she liked it. He fixed the leaky faucet, patched the drywall, and kept their small yard meticulously neat, using a second-hand lawnmower he'd bought for $75. His own vehicle, a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, was parked on the street so her car could have the garage. Her condescension was a low, steady hum in the background of their marriage. She called his job noble in a greasy sort of way. She'd wrinkled her nose when his friends from the port came over for a barbecue, their loud laughter and easy camaraderie seeming to offend her sense of decorum. "They're just a lot," she'd commented later, while wiping down the counters with a $15 bottle of organic cleaner. Roman had defended them, but quietly. He didn't like confrontation. He preferred peace. He thought this was the price of admission for a woman like Yara, a woman who shimmered, who turned heads, who made him feel, in his quiet moments, like he was punching above his weight. He remembered the day they signed the prenup, just before the wedding. It was his idea, born from a pragmatic view of the world. His lawyer at the time, a sharp black woman named Deidre Vance, had drafted it. It was simple. What was his, what was hers, and anything acquired together would be split 50-50. There was a specific clause about inheritances. They were to remain the sole property of the person who received them. Yara had laughed it off. "It's not like either of us is expecting a windfall, baby," she'd said, signing the document with a flourish of her pen. "It's just paper." Roman had filed it away and forgotten about it. He had no idea that simple piece of paper would one day become the most important document in his life. Tuesdays were her girls' lunch days. It was a sacred ritual. She would spend an hour getting ready, emerging from the bedroom in a cloud of perfume that cost more than his weekly grocery bill. Today had been no different. Before he'd left for what he thought would be a normal shift, he'd seen her laying out a dress on the bed, a silk wrap dress from Diane von Furstenberg that he knew had cost nearly $900, a birthday gift from him 2 years prior. She was going to meet her friends, she'd said, kissing him lightly on the cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Don't work too hard, honey." He remembered her saying it, and a cold dread, faint and unformed, began to coil in his stomach as he drove his Camry towards the river. He pushed it down. This was a day for joy, for celebration. He was about to change their lives. He was about to give his beautiful, ambitious wife the world. The drive to LaRue Riverside took 20 minutes. It was a world away from the industrial grit of the port. Here, on the banks of the St. Johns River, the streets were lined with old oak trees and historic, multi-million-dollar homes. Valets in crisp red jackets stood outside restaurants with names written in elegant, curling script. Roman felt a familiar pang of being an outsider as he pulled his dusty Camry, with its faded paint and a small dent in the rear bumper, into the valet line behind a gleaming black $120,000 Porsche Cayenne. The valet, a young man who looked like he was in college, tried to hide his surprise. Roman handed him the keys and a folded $20 bill. "Take care of her," he said with a small smile. He walked towards the restaurant, the heavy vellum envelope clutched in his hand like a holy text. It was 12:47 p.m. The sun was bright, glinting off the water and the expensive cars. He could hear the faint clink of silverware and the murmur of conversation from the restaurant's patio. He was nervous, but it was a happy nervousness, the kind you feel before a surprise party. He pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The interior was cool and dim, smelling of money and expensive perfume. A hostess with a sleek bob and a professionally pleasant smile approached him. "Good afternoon, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "No, I'm looking for my wife. She's here with some friends." "Yara Freeman," he said, his eyes scanning the room. The restaurant was filled with the city's elite, men in tailored suits and women in expensive silks, their laughter light and effortless. And then he saw her. She was in a corner booth, a prime spot with a panoramic view of the river. The sunlight pouring through the large window caught the highlights in her hair and made her skin glow. She was laughing, a genuine, unrestrained laugh that he hadn't heard in years. It was beautiful. For a split second, his heart swelled. Then he saw the rest of the scene. Her left hand was on the table, resting near a flute of champagne. Covering her hand, holding it in a gesture of possessive intimacy, was a man's hand. A man with a deep tan and a watch that glinted under the light, a Rolex Submariner, the kind that cost more than Roman made in 3 months. The man was leaning in close, his expression adoring. It was Linwood, a real estate developer Roman had met once at a charity event Yara had dragged him to. A man she had described as just a business acquaintance from the club. As Roman watched, frozen in the doorway, Linwood leaned in further and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a slow, deliberate kiss on the lips, full of a shared history Roman knew nothing about. Yara didn't pull away. She tilted her head, accepting it, her eyes closing for a moment in pleasure. The world went silent. The hostess's voice asking, "Sir, are you all right, sir?" faded into a dull roar, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation. It all disappeared. There was only the image in front of him, burned into his mind like a photograph. The two of them. So comfortable, so familiar. On the table between them was a half-empty bottle of Veuve Clicquot, the $90 champagne she always claimed was her favorite. Next to it was a platter of oysters, a $28 indulgence. This wasn't a lunch with the girls. This was a date. An intimate, expensive, long-running date. The phrase from her text last week, when he'd asked what she was doing on Tuesday, flashed in his mind. Tuesdays at LaRue, he never asks. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, an eternity. He felt nothing. No rage, no sorrow, just a profound, chilling emptiness. The love he had felt for her, the entire architecture of their marriage, crumbled to dust in that instant. It was a controlled demolition, silent and total. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. He calmly raised his phone, a Samsung Galaxy S21 he'd bought refurbished for $400. He centered the shot, making sure to capture the kiss, the champagne, Linwood's distinctive Rolex next to Yara's wedding ring. The shutter made no sound. He took 3 photos, each one a perfect, undeniable piece of evidence. Then he lowered the phone, turned around without a word, and walked out of the restaurant, past the bewildered hostess. He had the evidence. He had the money. But what was the right move? Confront her or disappear and plan? Tell us your strategy. Roman chose a path of silence, a path that would lead to a reckoning she would never see coming. The valet brought the Camry around. Roman's hand was perfectly steady as he took the keys. He got in the car and closed the door, shutting out the sun and the sound of the river. He sat in the driver's seat, the leather worn smooth over 187,000 miles of his life. The thick envelope with the $50 million news lay on the passenger seat. It felt like a mockery. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, his movements measured and precise. He didn't drive home. He didn't drive back to the port. He drove downtown towards the tall glass towers where deals were made and lives were unmade. The silence in the car was absolute. His mind wasn't racing. It was still. A deep, cold stillness. He replayed the scene from the restaurant not with emotion, but with the dispassionate analysis of a mechanic examining a failed engine. The casual way Linwood touched her, the look in her eyes, the practiced ease of their intimacy. This wasn't a new affair. This was a routine, a lifestyle, a long-term deception built on his trust and funded by his labor. Every extra shift he'd taken, every weekend he'd spent working on their house instead of relaxing, every small luxury he'd foregone so she could have her expensive things, it all felt like a contribution to her betrayal. He had been the stable, boring foundation for the life she actually wanted, a life with another man. His phone buzzed. It was Yara. He looked at her picture on the screen, a smiling photo from a vacation they'd taken 2 years ago. He felt a flicker of something, the ghost of a memory, the echo of a love that was now dead. He let it go to voicemail. He knew what the message would be, a cheerful, oblivious lie. "Hey, honey, just finishing up with the girls. Thinking of you. Call me when you get a chance." He pulled over on a side street overlooking the river, the same river she was looking at from her lover's side. He opened his contacts and found the number for Deidre Vance, the attorney who had handled their prenup. He hadn't spoken to her in a decade, but he had a feeling she would remember him. She answered on the second ring. Deidre Vance. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, sharp, clear, and brooking no nonsense. "Deidre, it's Roman Freeman," he said, his own voice calm and even. "We worked together on a prenuptial agreement about 10 years ago." There was a brief pause. "Roman, of course, I remember. Is everything all right?" "No," he said simply. "I need to see you. As soon as possible. It's about Yara." He didn't elaborate, not yet. He just laid out the facts of what he needed. An immediate consultation. He forwarded her the 3 photos from his phone with a simple subject line, Exhibit A. Then he explained the other part, the inheritance. He told her the amount. For the first time, Deidre Vance was silent for a full 5 seconds. "Roman," she said, her voice now laced with a new urgency. "Do not go home. Do not talk to her. Do not answer her calls. Come to my office. Right now." His next stop was the 32nd floor of the Bank of America Tower, the offices of Albright, Sterling, and Finch. Mr. Albright, a man in his late 60s with a kind face and a $4,000 bespoke suit, greeted him with a solemn handshake. They went over the final trust documents. Roman signed where he was told, his signature firm and clear. He gave Mr. Albright a specific instruction. "Under no circumstances is my wife, Yara Freeman, to be informed about this trust or its assets. Her name is to be nowhere on any document that she could possibly access. Is that understood?" Mr. Albright nodded, his expression unreadable. "Your instructions are perfectly clear, Mr. Freeman." By 2:30 p.m., Roman was sitting across from Deidre Vance in her corner office. She had the photos he'd sent displayed on a large monitor. She had already pulled up their prenuptial agreement. "It's ironclad, Roman," she said, her tone a mix of professional sympathy and strategic excitement. "The inheritance clause is unambiguous. The money is yours, and yours alone. What she did today? This is a gift, legally speaking. It's called dissipation of marital assets. Her expensive lunches with her lover, paid for from joint funds, We can use that. They spent the next 90 minutes mapping out the strategy. It was swift and brutal. Deidre would file for divorce electronically that afternoon. With it, she would file an ex parte emergency motion to freeze every single joint asset they had. The $450,000 house, the joint savings account, which held a balance of $12,450, a joint investment portfolio with a modest $38,000. It would all be locked down by the end of the business day. Yara would be cut off. She won't be able to use her credit cards, access the savings, nothing, Deidre explained. The photo you took is all the initial evidence we need for the judge to sign the order. The cost for the immediate filing and the emergency motion was a flat fee of $7,500. Roman didn't flinch. He transferred the money from his personal savings account using his banking app. It was the best money he had ever spent. By 4:15 p.m., it was done. Deidre received the electronic confirmation from the court clerk. The filings were complete. The order was signed. A process server was dispatched. Roman thanked her, his face a mask of calm composure. He walked out of her office, got back in his Camry, and drove to a small, clean hotel near the airport, a place that charged $119 a night. He checked in, went up to his room, and turned his phone off. The storm was coming for Yara. He had no desire to witness the landfall. Yara arrived home at 3:35 p.m. She was humming, a little flush from the 2 glasses of champagne. The afternoon with Linwood had been perfect, as it always was. He was exciting, powerful, and he saw her as the woman she wanted to be, not the wife of a simple crane mechanic. She tossed her $1,800 Louis Vuitton handbag on the kitchen counter and called Roman's phone. It went straight to voicemail again. Strange. He always answered. "Hey, honey, just got home," she trilled. "The girls were so chatty, I lost track of time. Hope you're having an okay day. Call me." She hung up and went to change into something more comfortable. She had no idea that a legal process was already in motion, a digital tidal wave heading directly for her. At 5:42 p.m., the doorbell rang. She was expecting a package from Netta Porter, a pair of $750 Jimmy Choo sandals she'd ordered last week. She opened the door to find a nondescript man in a polo shirt holding a thick manila envelope. "Are you Yara Freeman?" he asked. "Yes," she said, reaching for the package. "You've been served," he said, handing her the envelope and walking away. She stood in the doorway, confused. Served? She closed the door and tore open the envelope. The words leaped off the page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Freeman versus Freeman. Her breath caught in her throat. This had to be a joke. A sick, twisted joke. Then she saw the second document, emergency ex parte motion to freeze marital assets, and stapled to the back, as Exhibit A, was a color photograph. It was a picture of her and Linwood at LaRue. He was kissing her. The champagne bottle, the oysters, his Rolex. It was all there, in perfect, damning clarity. The photo was time-stamped, 12:47 p.m. She felt the blood drain from her face. Roman. He had been there. He had seen. Her hands began to shake. She immediately grabbed her phone and dialed his number, straight to voicemail. She left a frantic message. "Roman? What is this? What is this sick joke? You need to call me right now." She tried to log into their joint bank account. Access denied. She tried her American Express card, the one with the $20,000 limit she used for everything. She called the number on the back. A polite customer service agent informed her the account had been frozen by a court order. Panic, cold, and sharp began to rise in her chest. Everything was frozen. She had less than $100 in cash in her purse. She called Roman again, her voice rising in pitch. "How dare you? How dare you have some man serve me papers at my own home After everything I do for you. And that picture? It's not what it looks like. It's a total misunderstanding. You are being insane." She sent a rapid-fire series of texts. "You can't do this to me. The accounts are frozen. My cards are declined. I can't even buy groceries, Roman. This is humiliating." She paced the living room, the beautiful, expensive room she had curated so carefully. It now felt like a prison. She called her best friend, who was shocked. She called Linwood. He was furious. "How could you be so careless, Yara? My wife can't find out about this." He offered no help, only anger. The fun was over. She was a liability now. Desperation began to set in. She left another voicemail for Roman, her tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Baby, please. We can talk about this. Don't throw away 10 years over one stupid mistake. It was nothing. Linwood means nothing to me, I swear. Please, just come home. We can fix this." The full weight of the consequences began to cascade over the next few days. The asset freeze was just the beginning. The divorce petition named Linwood as her paramour, alleging she had used marital funds to support the affair. A copy was sent to his legal counsel. Within a week, Linwood's wife, a prominent philanthropist with deep ties to Jacksonville society, filed for divorce from him. His picture-perfect life imploded. A morals clause in a major real estate deal he was leading was triggered by the public scandal, costing his firm a $5 million contract. He was ruined, professionally and personally. He sent Yara one final text: "Stay away from me. You've destroyed my life." Then he blocked her number. Yara was adrift. She couldn't afford her own attorney. The one she consulted wanted a $15,000 retainer she didn't have. She was forced to sell her designer clothes and handbags on consignment websites, getting back pennies on the dollar. The $1,800 Louis Vuitton bag fetched $450. The $900 Diane von Furstenberg dress, the one she'd worn to her last lunch with Linwood, sold for $200. She had to beg her parents for money to move out of the Avondale house. She ended up in a cramped $200 a month apartment in a rundown complex, a world away from the life she had known. The white BMW, being a marital asset, was ordered to be sold by the court. Roman received his half of the proceeds, $14,000. She got the other half, which was immediately swallowed by her mounting legal fees. She had no marketable skills. The part-time job at the boutique had been more of a hobby. After months of searching, she found a job as a hostess at a chain restaurant, earning $15 an hour plus tips, wearing a cheap polyester uniform. The humiliation was total. She had traded a life of comfort and security, a life with a good man who loved her, for a few dozen expensive lunches, and the fleeting attention of a man who discarded her the moment she became inconvenient. She had no idea that the man she had betrayed, the man she had underestimated, was now one of the wealthiest men in the state. She had blown up her life for a glass of champagne, just as her husband was on his way to buy her the vineyard. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly. The prenup held, as Deidre Vance had promised it would. The inheritance was never even a point of contention. It was Roman's sole and separate property. He used a fraction of it, $85,000, to buy out Yara's half of the equity in the Avondale house. He kept the house, the one he had worked so hard to help pay for. The first thing he did was change the locks. The second was to get rid of all her things. He hired a company to pack up every piece of her fussy, expensive furniture, every piece of art, every throw pillow. He donated it all to a charity that helped women escaping domestic abuse. He repainted the walls himself, changing the cold grays she had chosen to warm, earthy tones. He sold her BMW's spot in the garage and parked his Camry there instead. The house slowly began to feel like his own. He didn't quit his job at the port. He loved the work, the smell of salt and diesel, the challenge of coaxing life back into giant machines. It grounded him. The money, he realized, wasn't for him. Not really. It was a tool, a responsibility. He thought about his great-aunt Alara, a woman he barely knew, and wondered what she would want him to do with her legacy. He established a foundation in her name. Its first initiative was the Roman T. Freeman Port Apprentice Scholarship. It was a multi-million-dollar program designed to give young men and women from Jacksonville's underserved neighborhoods a path to a stable, dignified career at the port. It covered the full $15,000 tuition for the certification programs, provided a $2,000 allowance for tools and work gear, and included a $20,000 annual living stipend so they could focus on their training without financial worry. The first class of 10 apprentices started that fall. Roman met with them, shook their hands, and saw in their eyes the same hope and determination he'd once had. He was changing lives, building something that would last. 1 year after he had walked into LaRue, he received an email from an address he didn't recognize. It was from Yara. She asked if he would meet her for coffee. She said she understood if he said no, but she needed to say something to him in person. Against his better judgment, he agreed. They met at a small, independent coffee shop, a world away from the places she used to frequent. She looked different. Thinner, tired. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple $30 dress from Target. The shimmer was gone. She looked like a normal person, burdened by the weight of her choices. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice quiet. He just nodded, sipping his black coffee. It cost $3. "I wanted to apologize," she said, looking down at her hands. "Not to get anything from you, I needed you to hear it. I was a fool, Roman. I was selfish and cruel, and I broke something beautiful because I was too shallow to see what it was worth. You were a good husband. You were a good man, and I threw it all away. I am so, so sorry." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Roman listened, and for the first time he felt a flicker of pity, but not attachment. The coldness inside him had thawed, replaced by a quiet peace. "I forgive you, Yara," he said, and he meant it. "I forgive you for my sake, not for yours. So I can let it go. I hope you find what you were looking for." He stood up, left a $10 bill on the table to cover their coffees, and walked out without looking back. It was the final closing of a door, a quiet, devastating end to a chapter of his life. There was no anger left, only a vast open space for whatever came next. The epilogue of Roman's story was not written in boardrooms or on the society pages. It was written on the calm, brackish waters of the St. Johns River. On Sunday mornings, just as the Florida sun was beginning to burn the mist off the water, he would take his boat out. It wasn't a yacht. It was a modest 19-foot center console, a used vessel he'd bought for $30,000. It was practical, sturdy, and perfect for what he needed. He'd anchor somewhere quiet, cast his line, and just be. He'd watch the pelicans dive and the manatees surface. He'd feel the gentle rock of the boat and the warmth of the sun on his skin, his luminous, deep brown skin that was no longer a source of his wife's faint disdain, but just a part of him, the man he was. He rarely thought about the money sitting in the trust, managed by professionals, growing quietly in the background. His life was here, in the solid feel of the fishing rod in his hand, the satisfaction of a job well done at the port, the knowledge that young people were getting a chance they might not have had otherwise because of him. He had learned the hardest lesson of his life in a sunlit restaurant booth, that some things look beautiful from a distance but are rotten at the core. And he had learned that true wealth had nothing to do with the number of zeros in a bank account. It was about character. It was about peace of mind. It was about the integrity you build your life on, a foundation that no betrayal can ever truly shatter. He was Roman Freeman, a port crane mechanic from Jacksonville, and for the first time in a long time, he was completely, unshakably free. Roman found his peace not in the millions he inherited, but in the purpose he created. If you believe in second chances and the power of integrity, subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories like this.